welcome to our Scrumish presentation here. It's going to be kind of a real brief look into Scrum and kind of the agile mindset. So this will be something that you can use in your classroom and or with your projects. It's a kind of a way to approach projects better and or kind of manage projects inside of your classrooms. Kristin Sheffield is with me. We're both at Earlham Community Schools. We were kind of trained on it last year. We've been using it a lot. I've used it in my classroom some this year, and I've used it a lot in my projects. And we're just going to kind of go back and forth on this, and there will be some participation in here. So hopefully you can get a little bit of practice here. Kristin, is there anything that you want to do to kind of kick it off?
No, I just a little bit of context. If you don't know us, some of you do, we share an office. So we bounce a lot of ideas, and this has really helped, I think, both of us be a little bit more organized and aware as we're planning. And when you're using it with the kids, it helps them do the same thing. So.
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, we're just going to kind of nibble around Scrum and kind of the agile mindset. There's a ton of resources out there, and what I found is I just kind of took what it was that worked for me, because none of my projects are huge and involve a ton of people, but there's a lot of things that you can take. And if you're interested in these, then the AEA has some great trainers, and there's a lot of resources out there on the web. So this is just here to kind of introduce you to it, and then you can take what you want here and then just keep going. You use it in your classroom or most of your other projects out there. So you can kind of see, it's about, I'm kind of losing part of my, it's about, making people awesome, making, we've all been on these projects in our schools, where they kind of get diverted. You'll see a pathway here whenever we start in on our meetings, or meetings just last forever and they don't ever seem to get anything done. And even the same way in our projects instead of our classrooms, where they're unending. And these Scrum is about, making sure that people are awesome. We keep revisiting our projects, making sure that they got done what it was exactly wanted to get done. They're focused in, they're not arbitrary. It's just an easy way to follow the process that it was that you wanted to set out to do from the beginning. Kristin, do you have anything to add in here?
It's definitely a process that has some linear steps, but there's also a lot of flexibility in the tools that you use along the way.
So, like I said at the beginning, we aren't going to necessarily do, like we did a 2-day Scrum training. So, in whatever, 40 minutes, we're not going to be able to touch everything. This is just going to be kind of a very brief overview. And there's some things that I'm not even going to be able to talk about even in this presentation, but I'm just going to give you kind of a top level view here. We'll go over kind of the Scrum Master stand-up meeting, which is stand-up meeting. If you get anything out of here today, it'll probably be the stand-up meeting and the backlog, the retrospectives, and then the team builders. There's some things that you can probably implement right away out of your classroom. So Scrum Master is pretty easy. That's the person that would typically be like a project manager in the classroom. Like for me, whenever I also teach computer science. And so Scrum would be used a lot in the IT field for programming. And that would be the Scrum Master, the person that would actually be certified in it. But, who cares, I guess, if you're actually, certified in it, because you can still do these things. And so I'll, run my stand-up meeting. I'll do all my retros, with my kids. And it's just that once they get calibrated with it, they understand it. So I'm, technically the Scrum Master. I'm the person that runs these things. I manage all the backlogs and all those things on my other projects. So it's just a person that kind of leads it. Kristin, do you have anything to add so far?
When you're using it with kids, a student could be the Scrum Master too within their group. So it doesn't have to be always teacher-led as they learn the process. Then someone in the small group could be that person that's managing the different parts along the way.
So this brings us to kind of the first part of what would be something in the Scrum toolbox, and that's the stand-up meeting. And I really think this is one of the most effective ways to communicate. So you get all of your people together, whether it's a project or something inside of your class. And I always like this term time box. So I've been in, executive meetings before where it's, you just go around the room and you talk about what it is that's been going on or the person that frustrates you, and it just lasts forever. The stand-up meeting is very specific. It's time box, which means that has a set amount of time on it. It says on there it's not a status meeting, but you cover 3 very specific things. And so whenever I use this every day in my computer science classes, so it's, what did you do last time? What are you going to do today? And then what are your impediments? And all I do is I just take notes. Like, that's it. There's no, and they literally stand up whenever they do it. And they're very calibrated to it. So they don't, there's no talking back and forth. We get through it very quickly. They understand how the process works. We started to implement some of it into our staff meetings, whenever we're working on these long-term projects. So, and if there's something that I need to follow up with a kid on, then I will go and I will talk to them afterwards. So it's not this constant back and forth that we just don't get through the meetings. Like, it just takes forever. And hopefully some light bulbs are going off. Like, sometimes meetings just go like this. So Kristin, anything to add on the stand-up meeting?
I think the time box helps the students speak very quickly. I used it with 6th graders last year in the STEM class that I taught, and there were about 18 of them in the room, and we could get around a circle and everybody could share something similar to these 3 questions within that time. And then, like Cory said, it's easy then to follow up with the 1 or 2 kids you need to check in with based on what you learned during that stand-up.
So here's the stand-up meeting. So hopefully we can do a little bit of practice here. And I'm not going to force anybody to talk if you don't want to. But so typically a stand-up meeting is just those 3 things. It's, what's something that you did in the classroom last year that you were, proud of? What's something that you're excited about doing this next year, something that you're excited about this next year? And then what are your impediments? And the idea about the impediments is, what is it, something that, me as a Scrum Master, I can start to help clear the way on, or I can start to, pool some resources. So I can start this off and then, maybe pass to, Kristin or somebody else. And if you don't want to talk, that's totally fine. Like, I'm not going to force anybody to, but I kind of want to give you an opportunity to kind of practice these things, because hopefully you can leave here with an idea of what the Scrum process kind of looks like, and kind of have, the skeleton of something if you're interested in doing it. So something that, if I were here, I think I have this time box here, which this doesn't really matter. I don't know if we're going to actually get 3 to 5 minutes, but I put 5 minutes on the clock. So something that I'm excited about, or what I did last year that I was proud of, is I started to use a lot more physical computing in the classroom. So I started to use a lot more robotics, and that was pretty interesting for my kids. So this next year, something that I'm excited about is I'm going to try to use some more Raspberry Pis in the classroom. It's, the little miniature computers. Something that I think would be some of my impediments would be actually, there's a big leap between teaching the kids the code first and then getting them to actually use the hardware. So I don't understand where the line is yet. So that's something that I need to be able to work on. So I don't know, Kristin, if you want to go second, if there's somebody else out there that wants to kind of pop in and talk about those 3 questions.
And then I'll hand off to one of the friends that we know on the screen, and they'll share, I'm sure. So last year, like I said, I taught a class of 6th graders, STEM. I'm an English teacher by training. So that was a fun experience. I learned a lot, got a lot better at it throughout the year. And next year, I'm excited because we're expanding that to be a K-8 special. So I'm excited. I've got to get that planned out for everyone, K-8. And my biggest impediment right now is I'm feeling the countdown to the first day of school and a big to-do list, and it will happen. It just feels like it might not. I'm going to pass off to Kate, because I think Kate will share something.
I had a feeling you would. So something I did in the classroom last year that I was really proud of, last year was my first year teaching English 9, and I feel like we just did a really good job of sequencing events, and kids were engaged throughout the year. So I was really proud of their engagement levels. Something I'm excited about for the upcoming year, As Kristin knows, I completely revamped my English 2, my sophomore year English curriculum. So I'm really excited for the depth and the variety of text that we are going to encounter in English 10 next year. My impediments, I'm going to echo what Kristin said. I just feel like there's a lot to get done right now, and my physical space is not ready. So it's going to be clearing all those things out before we can get into the nitty-gritty.
Great. Anybody else?
Thank you, Kate.
Yes, thank you. So that's fine. Like hopefully you get an idea of that. Just generally the Scrum Master sits off to the side, takes notes. I see that, Kate has a problem with her physical space. So I would go and I would meet up with her later and see what it is that I can do to help her out. Kristin's feeling some time crunches. So those are just some things that as a Scrum Master, I would go and I would talk to them about, if there's anything that I could do. So that's generally how the stand-up meeting works. It's quick, it goes. It's not it's a back and forth where everybody's, complaining about something. We've all been in those meetings. So is there anything else that you want to add, Kristin, before we move on?
I think that last point you made about it's not a back and forth. It's really just I share and we move to the next person. There's no problem solving in that moment. There's no discussion in that moment. It's just listening and sharing. And as you listen, you might pick up a solution to your problem in hearing somebody else share, and vice versa. Or you might say, like I might say, oh, I'm going to go talk to Kate because I too am working on a physical space that I'm standing in here, and maybe we can pool our resources, or I can help her because I'm offloading some things that might help her organize.
Yes. And I'm doing that all the time as a Scrum Master. I'm figuring out where people are at on different things. Thank you. Okay. So the next item, and hopefully this is something that you guys can pick up too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kristin, but this is basically just a big to-do list. The backlog. It's specific terminology to Scrum, but it's vital. And so each one of those items on there is just going to be a to-do, doing, and done, right? So this would be a backlog for my Scrum presentation. So we've talked about the Scrum Master, we've done the stand-up meeting, and literally right now we're doing the backlog. So right now we're doing it. Whether you did the stand-up meeting or not, hopefully you've got an idea in your head of something that you're excited about for this upcoming year, because hopefully you can start to break those down. And in Scrum, we would call those kind of epics, different ideas of what it is that you need to do in order to get to your done. What is your idea of done? Like, what does that all look like for your so those things that you're excited about? What does that final product actually look like? So, you create all these tasks, and then, these are all, each one of those tasks, then you can start to, I don't have this on here, but those would each then be sprints. How do you then look at each one of those tasks, and then you start moving it over to the doing part? So hopefully that kind of makes sense. The backlog is super helpful, right, Kristin?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say Cory and I are very different people. You would probably agree, Cory.
Yeah.
I'm a list maker and very organized, and this helps me. I would say Cory is a little bit more disorganized, and it helps him too. So especially if you like that sense of satisfaction and you want to celebrate, if you write your to-do list, your backlog on Post-it notes, and then you can easily put it in another column, you're like, okay, I'm tackling it, I'm getting it done. So if Kate's thinking about her physical space, she may include 5 tasks for her physical space that she wants to do. And then as she does it, she physically moves it over, and there's like a little endorphin rush, and you're like, yes, I'm getting closer to the end. So it's a good visual representation of what you're accomplishing, especially if it's a mental task.
Yeah, and I'll do that because I'm the technology director as well. Sometimes I'll just put things into a backlog just so I can do the same thing, where I just start moving things from to do, doing, and done. It just helps me to know what it is that I'm focusing in on. It's a super helpful tool. All right, so some backlog examples. Some of these things, like this first example from the AEA, this one is, so I've recently done a very big project inside of the school district. And so I literally, each one of these items would technically be called an epic. So, each one of those, and then each one of those you could turn into like would be considered a sprint. Hopefully I'm not talking incorrectly here, but you would just go and you would, put all of your resources into finishing each one of those. So we go to do, doing, and done, right? So we've, like, each one of these things I've gone through and actually done, and some of them are, you could break down even further into, smaller tasks. And if you're doing things in the classroom, you talk to your kids, you see, okay, you want to, you want to build a robot. Okay, so how is it that we want to get, from our definition of done, we want to build these out into, tasks. So we want to start off with these tasks, and we want to break these down into epics. And then we want to start moving those across the board. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So this is my, there's go ahead, Kristin.
Oh, I wasn't going to add anything. I know where you're going next. Just go with it. I'll add at the end.
Yeah. And so there's tons of examples out there, okay, of backlogs, but backlog is really just a to-do list. Okay. So, and if you start to see kind of how this all falls together, so you've got your, your master, backlog, and then if you've got your, your group of students that each day you get up and you do your stand-up meeting, you're talking about, what would be, if I was talking to my kids about, putting in VoIP phones, which I wouldn't have my kids put in VoIP phones, but we would, talk about, that would be one of our stories that that would be one of our epics that we want to finish. So we would be talking about, how they move through that. I'm doing a lot of motion here, but how is it that we would move through each one of those things? Hopefully this is starting to make sense. So, it goes from the stand up, how do those things work? And then we just start to move. As a Scrum Master, I'm trying to move impediments out of the way. So this is from the AEA. It's a little bit more intense. I just like the simple backlog, just the to-do, doing, and done. There's tons of examples on the web. Yeah. Anything else, Kristin?
No, I think your next one is to practice, right?
Yeah. So kind of the same thing here. So if you can take, one of your, this is a simple backlog. So if you can take one of your, whatever it is that you are excited about for this next year. So make a copy of this, and then just start breaking it down into activities. So if there's something that you're excited about in the classroom. So for me, it would be using more physical computing in the classroom. So what tasks do I need to break that down in order to make that happen? I would need to first, acquire the technology. I need to look at what my curriculum is. Each one of those becomes a task. That kind of makes sense. Hopefully, questions, comments, concerns.
So if you have a piece of paper here with you, if you can't get to Cory's spreadsheet here and make a copy, just jot down. For example, I'm working on setting up a classroom right now, the STEM classroom, and I had 5 specific things I wanted to do. In order to feel like this space is done enough for day 1, write down what those 5 things would be for your task. And think about a timeline too. What needs to be done first? What needs to be done second? What's the easiest thing? Maybe you want to knock that out, feel that sense of accomplishment. Maybe you want to put it at the end because you'll be tired by then. I don't know. It's your backlog.
Yeah, and some things go directly into doing, and I've done that several times. So it's just an idea of each one of those tasks. You just put them into your list. I mean, hopefully this makes sense. And then we'll get to retrospectives here, where whenever a task gets done, you just reevaluate, whether it's with your kids or your team or whatever, how that went. Questions, comments here? All right. I feel like we're flying, but I guess that's okay. Presentations, as long as it is. We ready for users? Go ahead.
The user story, I think, might be something that you want to think about in conjunction with your backlog. And depending on your task, your project that you're trying to tackle, you might want to consider that before you get to your backlog, because it could generate additional tasks. Go ahead, Cory.
No, it's perfectly correct. So your user story is, depending on what your project is, you just think about whatever your project is through the eyes of your actual user. So like whenever I was talking about, I had this really big project that I did, and so I would look at my project through the teacher's eyes, through the superintendent, and I'll show you the examples here, through the superintendent's eyes, through a community member's eyes, and then I would think about what the definition of done is. Now, are all of your projects going to be so big that you necessarily have to do a user story? No, but you should have like a general idea. The kids can go through and they can create a user story. What is it that it looks like? What is it that your users want whenever they get the actual project? Sometimes you're the user as the teacher. So, what does done look like? It's a good idea to think about before you get to the end of your project, making sure that your user can actually accept that. So we've got a couple of, here's just a template of it. So, as a user, if I'm a superintendent, or I'm a just a community member, it's like whenever I was doing my phones one, I'll show you an example of this. What is it that they want? What functionality would they want out of it? How is it that they're going to be able to accept it? How is it they're going to be able to know that whatever it is that you created actually works? If you're doing something in the classroom, as the teacher, how are you going to be able to accept that project? What is it going to look like? So what else am I missing here, Kristin?
Just as an example, the next session I'm going to present on planning and hosting a STEM family night. I used this process and I considered all of the individuals that would be participating in a family night here. So the business partners that are coming, our teachers who are volunteering, our students and parents who are participating, and thinking about, okay, from that role as a student, when I come to a STEM family night, I want to, okay, what would a student want? And that might involve having a conversation with that user to really understand it instead of just making assumptions. And so those are activities that might need to happen. And then I'm going to think about it from the parent perspective, from the business partner perspective, and I'm going to take their ideas to make my idea even better.
Yeah, and that's a great thing too, is, if you're doing projects with the kids, that you can get them, outside of the classroom, they can go and actually talk to users. And, if I'm building robots and I can have them, a robot for somebody else, they can go and actually fill out, a user story. Boone does this, they do agile stuff. So they actually fill out users, they do a lot of agile stuff. So they actually go and they fill out, user stories, and they follow this agile, this Scrum process. This would be an example of what it was that I would have done for my project. So it's very simple outline of what it is that you want your users actually want whenever your projects are done. Okay. So what is it they're going to accept as being done whenever you or your kids are finished? All right. So kind of the same thing here. So if you take what you're excited about from your final, or from your for this upcoming year, if you were to take what you're excited about and then create a user story as to what that would look like. And maybe it's not associated with what it is that you're doing for this upcoming year, but something that you have on the horizon and you want to create a user story, then this is an opportunity to do it. And all you need to do is just double click on this and you can create a user story to see kind of what it looks like. So you think about what your end user may want, and then what it would look like to be done. And these are great conversations to have with people too. Anything to add in here, Kristin?
Nope. Jenny, that's a good question. I will switch screens and share Cory's presentation here with you.
Yeah, I can pop it into the.
Do you have yours?
Yeah, if I can pop it into the. Yeah, because we'll have some. Okay, so kind of winding down here. Okay, so we start off with the startup meeting. The backlog kind of keeps track of all of your stuff. Your user stories is what you want it to look like at the end. And then if you think about, I haven't mentioned it in here, but a sprint would be actually going and doing the work, right?
It's one task off your backlog.
Yeah, one task off your backlog. Very good. And then retrospective would be, this isn't necessarily, none of this stuff is really rocket science, right? So it's just taking what it was that you did and then reviewing it, right? So looking at the process to making sure, seeing what, and you're never really you're not pointing fingers, you're just looking at what went well and then what can be improved for the next time. So hopefully this kind of makes sense. You're making sure that your team can then, work at maximum efficiency. That kind of makes sense. Kristin, am I missing anything there with retros?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to evaluate how you did, give honest feedback to your team members. And that way, when you hit that next sprint or the item on your backlog, you're doing it that much better. So everyone is, like Cory said, working to their best maximum potential.
One of the functions of Scrum is to just kind of make people awesome. So it's always very people focused. So like whenever we went to this training, we were always doing these interactive team builders, and you're always talking about how the process is going. And so I don't know that I've ever strayed much from, if there's another thing that you get from this presentation, is probably these energizers. So there's some great retrospectives in here. So being able to go back and review what it was that your team or your kids went through and did, and to find a better way to do it the next time. But then there's also some. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in order for your retrospective to be effective, in order everybody to feel comfortable sharing honestly, right? They have to have a good sense of trust and a sense of team. So these team builders, while they seem like they're just fun activities and a waste of time, if you take the time to do them, your kids are going to work together that much better.
Yeah, and so there's just a bunch of them on here just to use, whether it's a retrospective or a team builder, or they would call them energizers, I guess, in the Scrum world, just to get people going, before you would, kind of start the day. And you can do some of these remotely. I guess not many people are remote anymore, but just to kind of, get people going. We've used these in our meetings before. I've used them in the classroom. So it's a great thing to bookmark using your classroom. So just another great tool to use out there. So anything else that you want to add on retros or team builders, Kristin?
Will you scroll down one more? So I can see that one. Yeah, so there are lots of different ideas. They're all interactive, reflective, metacognitive type pieces. And don't skip them. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, very true. All right, I think we're kind of winding up here. I wasn't sure how much the interactive part would take, but it is what it is. I'm not a guy to keep people around in class longer than I need to. So like I said, we got the majority of these resources from our training, and I just like how much it's helped kind of evolve what my classroom looks like. And then Kristin and I obviously share the same classroom, so we talk a lot about our backlogs, and then stand-up meetings. It's very exciting stuff. And then the Heartland Scrum presentation, there's some great resources at the AAA if you're more interested about that, or if you want some more information about this. Trello is a great resource if you want to visually represent your user stories and or backlogs. And then there's a big push to get Agile into the classroom. So hopefully I just kind of piqued your interest in using
SCRUM in the classroom, whether it's for small projects. And really, the stand-up meeting is awesome. And then using the backlog, with your projects, hopefully you can just pick and choose a couple of these things, use some of those retros, just something new to try out this next year. So, Kristin, what else do you have?
Do you guys have any questions for us? Of course, I think Cory's got our emails on the next slide. We're happy to collaborate in the future, answer questions, what have you. Like Cory said, at the AEA that are awesome at this too, and there are some classes out there that you can take if you're interested in learning more, or just look at the internet because it's all out there as well.
All right. Thank you very much. That's probably it for us.